Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics either in business or in life and simplify them. Now, friends, I have a really special guest today that I think is going to give, hopefully, you some real clarity in your life and actually help you create a little bit of flow in your business as well. My special guest today, her name is Abigail Steidley, and she's a mind-body coach who has long helped clients connect to divine guidance and create well-being. She makes the mind-body-spirit connection both practical and magical for people so they can learn to trust themselves, be kind to themselves, and create from a place of joy. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast today, Abigail Steidley. Hello, Abigail.
Hello, so glad to be here.
Oh, Abigail, I want to talk to you so much about so many things, but I will try to narrow it down. I love what you talk about on your website and your blog and your most recent ebook. How to use mind-body magic to really create flow in your business. But maybe we should back up a little bit. What is this whole mind-body syndrome thing? What is that? Can you define that for us?
Sure. So I was in my early 20s when I developed a chronic pain syndrome, and it was a pelvic pain syndrome. And I did kind of this whole thing, going to all these doctors, all these alternative health practitioners, and it was such a crazy struggle. I couldn't find my way back to health. And then I ended up meeting a couple people and reading a couple books and kind of getting this clarity that my own mind-body connection and how I was dealing with the world internally was affecting my body. And so I discovered there's this thing called, it's called TMS by some people, which was a term coined originally by Dr. John Sarno. And then now some people in the community of mind-body healing call it mind-body syndrome. So either term, totally the same thing. But it just means that you've got pain in your body that's being created unconsciously, of course, not like we're sitting around going, I want to create pain, but it's unconsciously created by how we're handling stress, how we're handling emotions, and the way we are either listening or not listening to ourselves. And I kind of add a couple of things to that, like being disconnected from our bodies, not being aware of our bodies, and not knowing what they're trying to tell us throughout the day. So that's a quick, short summary of what that syndrome really is. And healing by discovering that was kind of my path to what we're going to talk about today, basically.
Well, and I can tell you firsthand that this is so true. And I never knew this before, or actually earlier this year, where I was dealing with some chronic pain in my pelvis, and really struggling, going, what is this? And it just is so fascinating to me in how powerful your brain is. I mean, and how the connection between your physical body and your mental health is like intertwined. I mean, it's crazy.
Yep. Inseparable.
Yeah. And you're not like super old. So how is it that you had, this chronic pain at your, what was it, early 20s or so? I mean, it's not necessarily related to, oh, I'm 80 years old and this is what happens to a body. Like it can happen to anyone at any age, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I've worked with people in their teens even. So yeah, anytime, any part, the body is like telling us things and saying, hey, you need to make some changes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I found with my own chronic pain, and I'm curious if this was the same for you, is that at first it was like whispering at me, hey, Mary, something's wrong. And then it's like, no big deal. Keep going, busy, do my thing, right? And then at some point, my body was starting to say, hey, Mary, hello, something's wrong. And you're like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just getting worse. Oh, I can only sleep on one side of my body. Oh, no big deal. And then at some point, my body was just like screaming at me like, hey, Mary, something is seriously wrong. Is that the same for you when you were going through that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it built up slowly over time, just living with little symptoms, and then they became larger symptoms, and then pretty soon flat out can't function.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when it
Totally.
affects your sleep and it affects your work and it affects your mind, like ability to
Yeah.
think in clear sentences and, be all of that, like it's serious, very serious.
Yes.
You say in your book, like your pain syndrome is waking you up to more spiritual growth. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you about that for hours, so I'll try not to do that. But it's such an amazing connection between what happens in our body and what's happening in our spirit. So I think of it this way. Most of us are unconsciously kind of walking around like with our heads cut off from our bodies, like floating heads.
Yeah.
We don't realize that there's all this sensation happening and we're not fully aware of it. We're not feeling emotional sensation in the body. We're not feeling energy sensation in the body, and we're not feeling messages that are coming through in the body. I mean, think about sometimes, I'm sure you may have had this experience as a business entrepreneur, oh, I really need to go to the bathroom. It's been like 4 hours and I've totally ignored that. Or I'm really starving and I've been not eating all day, or whatever it is. Like even those basic things that our bodies are telling us, we're not listening to those. It's such a cultural way of being that has just kind of evolved. So here we are, and the body starts to say, this isn't going to work, because all that information that we need from our soul, from our spirit, is not available unless we're listening to sensation in the body, because it doesn't like pop through, and I wish it would. It doesn't just go into our brain and say, hey, for your best interest, you should do blah, blah, blah.
Right. Because we all want that secret, like 5-step plan to simplify everything, right? Yeah.
Right. The loud and like the calling of the angels, Here
it is.
letting us know. Nope, doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So that to hear those subtle messages, to follow what's really our true path and what's really best for our spirit, it requires that ability to really listen. And so for me, I was completely disconnected from my body, had no idea I had a body, basically.
Yeah.
And I was used to pushing, overachieving, forcing, making stuff happen. I was a music major in college, and you just perform at all costs, And I'm really good at that. I could show up dying and still perform,
Yeah.
And that was killing my body and my spirit both. So my body started hurting. I went on this long journey of discovery, finding out that I have a body, understanding emotional sensation, understanding subtle information from the body. And then I started to feel divine connection, like actual sense of what is right for me, or where I'm meant to go in this moment, or even big picture, where's my life really meant to go at this time? And I started following that instead of following like the shoulds or the things other people think, or whatever the latest authority says, or, all of that stuff that's external.
Right.
And I really started living from an internal place of spiritual connection, divine connection to what's right for my soul. And then I started to feel real joy, Where before, I think I mostly just felt disconnection, numbness, anxiety, things like that in my early 20s.
And I can imagine lots of people that are listening right now are nodding their head like, yep, yeah, that's me. You've just described me, and you've just described how I've felt in the last few weeks, months, God knows long, how many years. Can I ask, it's a silly question, but I think a couple of people are probably listening thinking this themselves.
Sure.
Do you have to be religious to believe in a spiritual connection, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I don't think so. I actually wasn't religious at all. I was raised in a family that was just pretty open, relaxed. We didn't have a specific church or anything, and not a specific religion. So for me, it was like, I don't know if in some ways that might have been good, because I didn't really even have any preconceived notions. But as I started to awaken to this spiritual connection, I felt like it's really broad and really free. Like I could read something from Buddhist text or from Christian text or from whatever text and get something out of it and feel connected without focusing on a specific religious path. That's just how I see it. And even if, I've worked with people who do have a specific religious path, and I feel like that it's still spiritual connection too. It doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
what individual preferences or individual feeling.
I agree with that. And I think, it depends on, for people, sometimes it's the word that you put on things that gives
Right.
it a connotation or not. It gives it a
Exactly.
trigger or not. And so, we'll use words interchangeably here on the podcast of like God or the universe or source or love. I mean, that's really at the core of what it all is, in my opinion. So tell us more about divine guidance. What does that mean to you? And how does it show up?
Yeah. Well, oh man, it's such a fun topic. I feel like divine guidance is that feeling, like you just said, of love and expansiveness in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when we know, okay, we are aligned and connected, and in that flow with God or source or universe.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I experience it as simply just feeling or sensation. Sometimes I experience it as even actual messages that flow in when I'm trying to connect, so to speak, or being open to connecting. Sometimes it's really in the moment, like that intuitive awareness, like, oh, do this right now for some reason, and you have no idea why.
Yep.
So it's almost all like completely mind free, I kind of like to say. Like there's no logic involved necessarily until you kind of get clear on what's coming through. And then you might use your brain to like figure out what the action steps are. But it feels very like non-thought out, non-logical, non-organized. Sometimes it can feel really like weird. Like, what? I'm being called to do this right now. It seems so random. So those are kind of some of the, I think, signs of divine connection.
Yeah. And I love that in your work, you really talk about embodiment. I mean, talk about really getting connected to what your body is trying to tell you. And yeah, I mean, it makes me excited when I hear the work that you're doing about really looking at that as magic. And I think divine guidance is in essence that magic as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I just love the word magic. I know it doesn't always resonate for everybody, but to me, it's like instead of going through life the way I was, like over-efforting, overachieving, trying to be a perfect person, perfectionism, all that stuff, instead going with this divine connection thing where, oh, this stuff is popping through for me and following that, and then things get done faster, easier, better, simpler, more efficiently,
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it comes back to this concept of creating flow. Like when you're in flow, it's waves going in and out. It's such a different mode of thinking than push, strive, go, hustle, 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 grind.
Yeah.
Like all of that. It's just got a different feel to it. And I think I'm curious if your work and the stuff you're talking about today is also aligned with. You hear people kind of say divine feminine. Is that similar to what you're talking about here, or something different?
I think it's definitely part of it. Yeah. The way I see it is we've kind of had a lot of masculine in our culture, the way of being, but I wouldn't call it divine masculine. I would call it, just some kind of mind-driven masculine, like achieve, force, push, stuff we just talked about. So really, I think what it is the divine feminine and the divine masculine in a really nice blend. So like you feel the feminine flow, the feminine emotions, the feminine qualities of nurture, self-compassion, care, kindness, and then it flows into creativity. And then I feel like you start crossing into divine masculine. Now creativity becomes action steps, becomes things that you do and take steps toward, and then you start bringing in some more clarity in the mind that creates systems and structure, and then you actually create something real, manifest into the world that has some of that. You kind of need that masculine quality to get it to the completed phase, whatever it is. You can't always just stay in kind of dream space, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's that real combined blend of the divine energy that has both qualities, I guess, is how I see it.
Yeah. And what perked my ears up in particular when I was introduced to your work and what you're doing out in the world for people is really this in particular. I think a lot of people talk about self-care as well they should. And I think that's evolved also to self-love. But what I think is really interesting about the work that you do is you talk a lot about self-kindness. And in your ebook, you mentioned one of your favorite authors, John O'Donohue, and just wanted to kind of share that quote with you guys and let this simmer in your ears. He says this: "Something deep in the human soul seems to depend on the presence of kindness. Something instinctive in us expects it, and once we sense it, we're able to trust and open ourselves." And you add on, when we seek trust and open to ourselves, self-kindness is the way. So tell us more what you mean by self-kindness, and how does that help create flow?
Yeah, I think this is a really big topic. It's like if we don't have self-kindness, then we've got a little bit of a block there that prevents some of the flow from happening, which I well know from lots of experience of being not kind to myself at all. And the kindness I'm talking about goes beyond a lot of the external activities that we see as doing things that are nice for ourselves. I see it as an act of self-kindness to be connected to my body, to be aware of sensation in my body, to feel my emotions internally and be cognizant of them as sensation, to be aware of my mind and what it is or isn't doing in my favor. Some of these things that they wouldn't necessarily pop into our minds as the first idea, but as I'm doing that kind of stuff for myself, then I'm able to really listen and really be a really good friend who's listening to what's really going on for me. So kind of like we would do for each other as good friends, like, hey, what's going on? What's up? You seem sad, or you seem overwhelmed. What's happening? How can I help?
Yeah.
That extended towards ourselves. And I'll find things I didn't even know were lodged in my heart, when I do that. And then I'm able to really take good care, like change something that needs to be changed, or do something that I'm longing to do, that I've totally overridden with my mind. Stuff like that.
And it's so funny, but it bears repeating, because I know we've heard it before, but sometimes we say the worst things to ourselves. Like we are
Exactly.
the worst friend. Like you would never say that to a girlfriend, the things that we say to ourselves. And it's, it is a cycle that desperately needs breaking. And
Yes.
you've now gone to the other side of the cycle where you're starting to see self-kindness and practicing it is really making changes in your life, right?
Yeah. And here's the simplest little thing that a person can do every day. And speaking of what you were just saying, think of how we talk about ourselves to ourselves all day long. If you make this one shift, it can make a huge difference. And sounds kind of silly, but finding a pet name for yourself that's yours, kind of like you would for a kid or a dog, I call my daughter 15 different pet names, finding the one that's for you, I'm going to call myself, for me, it's Sweet One. So I can preface things I'm saying to myself in my mind with that pet name.
Yeah.
This kind, oh, Sweet One, of course you're feeling down right now. This was really tricky, or whatever it might be. So I'm learning to talk to myself like I really would somebody I truly, deeply love, like my child, for example.
I love that. And, I live in the UK, and so please, my British listeners, don't take that with a level of sarcasm. Genuinely, think about yourself in a loving way. It takes time to chip away at that hard outer shell we put around our souls, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned in the ebook, and by the way, you guys we'll give you a link so that you can download this ebook for free later at the end of this episode. So you can definitely read it and learn more. But you talk about the 4 steps to a kind process. Can we roll through those just real quickly?
Sure. Yeah. So the ebook is just a little process that I ended up creating basically for myself because I have a lot of great mind-body tools and ways to connect in, and I can get a little overwhelmed from all my own ideas.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I really need a quick, simple way to just go right in and help myself out every day with connection.
Great.
And you guys have to understand, for me, it was not an option, basically. If I don't do this, my body hurts. So that's what I've learned. I have to take good care of myself in this way, or I suffer. So it's like, okay, this has got to work, basically. So like, all right, how am I going to dial this into a simple process? So the K stands for know your body. So you're really going to pay attention to sensation in the body. And I won't go terribly deep into that because there's lots of layers that could be there. But being aware, just aware that you have one is a good step. So I always start with, oh, I have feet, and kind of wiggle my toes and feel them. Oh, I'm breathing. I have breath. Oh, I have hands. Oh my gosh, feel all that stuff that I'm living in.
And it's funny because you do go through life so unconscious of like, oh, when you actually say, hey, take a couple of seconds and just focus on how your feet feel, then you're like, oh, actually, know, you completely shut it down sometimes, right? And it's nice to help you get back to center. So even that simple thing is, does wonders.
Exactly. So that's what I think of as know that you have a body. Know your body exists. It sounds crazy, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then I go with the I. So I stands for inhabit your emotions. And I use that word because there's so much about emotion out there that I wanted something completely unique. Because feel them doesn't tell you much. Express them, there's all kinds of stuff about that. It's just, all we really are looking for in the I is that you know that you have an emotion, and you don't even have to know what it is. You don't have to label it. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to analyze it. In fact, all of those things can take us out of emotional experience. So instead, you're just feeling it as an energetic sensation in the body. So it might be like, wow, it feels kind of heavy, or like a bunch of fizzing bubbles, or whatever. So you're really noticing the actual physical experience of that emotional energy.
Yeah.
So that's I.
Great. And then N.
N is notice the mind, because the mind tends to have all kinds of stories and judgments and ideas and concerns, and or the to-do list starts popping in to distract us from feeling emotion. And some of the core work around mind-body syndrome is that we kind of distract ourselves out of emotion to the point that the body begins to suffer.
Yeah.
Because we're storing all of this stuff in our body's emotional experience from a lifetime. So it's kind of just figuring out, okay, what's my mind doing? What's its trick of the day or trick of the moment right now?
And anybody that's listening that has ever experienced a panic attack, or, I mean, it's so inexplicable to people who've never had one, because it's very scary. And it also, when your mind starts to go into swirling patterns and fear takes over, it really shows up on a physical level in your body. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we forget that. We forget how your mind plays such an important part in your health. I mean, in all ways. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then D.
And D, discover your inner wisdom. So this is the last part of the process. And I'm kind of like, this is where I'm an inner wisdom, divine guidance junkie. So I like to go through KIN just so I can get to the D, basically. And that's when you've cleared all of the stuff that's in the way of hearing that guidance. So I'll sit down and go, okay, I've gone through KIN. Now, what do I need to know today? What's the message that needs to come through right now? Maybe it's something specific I'm asking about, or maybe it's just general like that. Like, what do I need to know today? And then I just kind of listen and sit quietly and with my body. And then I will start to feel that sense of like, oh, I'm kind of uplifted. There's a little bit of expansiveness. And then because I've done this a lot, I hear the ideas in my mind pretty quickly. Like, oh, today it would be really good for you to take a walk, or you need to lie down, or you need to spend some time hugging your daughter, whatever. It could be anything in the world. Eat spinach today. Literally, it could be that simple.
Yeah.
So I just sit and listen at that point. For
yeah.
the D.
And I feel like, I mean, when you get clear, and you really, it's like almost like clearing out the earwax in your ears so that you can actually hear your intuition giving you those nudges. Really, it's your inner nurturer inside, right? That's just saying, hey, we need to drink more water today.
Right.
Hey, you haven't been outside the house in a couple of days. Let's get some human contact with other people. It's just little things. It doesn't always have to be these big, grandiose gestures of self-care, right?
It's true. And like I use it very business specifically too. So if say I'm going to write a blog or I'm going to take a step in my business, I will do this process and listen and ask for the input. And I will find surprising answers. Totally. Like there's even one that's kind of happened today that's interesting just in this very interview. Like stuff like that for my business is super fun. I love that for my work.
You were telling me a story a while ago about how you were hoping to get $2,000 to invest in your business, and you went to your inner intuition and it told you to take a nap, right?
Right.
And so you're like, okay, I'll take a nap. And then you woke up and then there was an email that basically was going to be $2,000 rolling into your bank account. Like, that's great, Abigail. Can we get more of that in our life? Like, that is true attunement right there.
Yep. That's why I call it magic, right? I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's how I know I'm in flow. That's how I know things are working, is when stuff feels like that awesome, that easy, that joyful, that fun, you know, it's got to feel fun.
All right. So wait, let's break it down right now and let's talk about Magic Wand, Magic Body 101, right? So you talk about like your body is a magic wand. So tell us, how do we get to that level? What are some simple tips that you've learned so far?
Yeah, well, this is actually why I created the KIND process, because it does simplify everything. I have like in my arsenal a billion ways to connect to your body, a billion ways to feel emotion, a billion ways to know what the mind is doing and not get snowed by it all the time, and a billion ways to connect to inner wisdom. But that process kind of takes it and simplifies everything into this really easy. I do it in 5 minutes sometimes. And the idea is, you have to connect to the body. So body is step one. And the body is magical because it's not trying to keep us from doing things. It's not trying to torture us. It's not trying to just break down. It's saying, look, I have all this information for you. I have tons and tons of information. So that's always like the bottom line, right? We have to connect to the body and be aware of it.
Mm-hmm. And so after we've done that, then what's the next step?
Well, then you can kind of look at this a couple ways. When you connect to the body, and the reason it's hard sometimes is we have emotion in there. Mm-hmm. And our culture, I'm just going to say, does a terrible job of helping us with emotions. There's so much stuff that you learn as a kid about dismissing emotions, overriding them, not feeling them, all of that. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a kind of a cowboy area, so it was always cowboy up.
Mm-hmm. Boys don't cry. Yeah, all of that nonsense.
Just suck it up. Yeah, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So the part that I think people get tripped up around is you try to connect to your body, and it's really uncomfortable because there's anxiety, there's depression, there's fear, there's anger. So the kindness is learning to how to allow that stuff without self-judgment and really, truly letting ourselves have those experiences of emotion. And so that part is like where it can get a little hard. Like, oh my gosh, I'm in my body. Yuck. It doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. So that's when we want to create that support for ourselves to know how to feel and give ourselves the freedom to like journal, write things down, figure out what it is we do need to express as we're feeling emotion. Just kind of open that box. That's kind of how it looks, I think.
And I think that a lot of people understand that from a fundamental level. But I think what happens, if I can be so bold to say, I think what happens is that we get busy. And we're just like, oh, we're in the hamster wheel. We just go, 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 go. Oh, I'll deal with that later kind of thing. And then B, I think we tend to isolate and we tend to think, well, this is my ish. I'm not going to tell it to anybody else because, everybody else will think I'm either broken or weak or whatever. And so we don't go and we don't reach out for help, whether that is a coach or a therapist or just your girlfriend, somebody somewhere. Do you find that that's happening as well in the world?
Oh, definitely. And that's where I think we come back to divine feminine,
Yeah.
because feminine energy says emotions flow. We can allow them. Like if you think about being a mother and your child is crying, you reach out to them, you wrap your arms around them, you say, "Oh, come here, let me hold you." It's the same idea. We're going to hold our emotions with that kind of kindness. And that's that feminine, amazing, beautiful, self-nurturing quality. And it's that kind of almost like perverted masculine, not in a, sexual way, but
Yeah.
like altered masculine energy where I'm not going to let myself feel this. I'm going to push through it. I'm going to ignore it. But really, these emotions are the superpowers behind what we're trying to create. So if I'm like, here's a quick example. I had a client who was feeling afraid because she had a speech. And she was like trying to avoid the fear and not have the fear and just do the speech. That's kind of the way we do it. And so instead we went into this process of feeling the fear, allowing it, letting it have a voice, being with it, holding it. And in the end, all it was trying to say was, you really need to take 7 steps in order to give a really good speech. And we literally wrote out those 7 steps that it was trying to tell her. And so she was able to go, oh, I just need to practice. I need to do this. I need to research this one thing, blah, blah, blah. And then now she was like, okay, I can give this speech. And the fear became the like guiding factor in how to be super successful at what she was doing.
Yeah.
So that's a superpower. It's not a weakness, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think that what happens is that we try to like hold it all down, like all the emotions and not deal with it like they're beach balls in the ocean,
Right.
and something's going to pop up eventually and go nuts. I mean, I think giving it a voice is important. Like you said, being able to sit with it is so important. But yeah, I mean, I see for me, my personal practice is that journaling is such a huge part of helping me heal. Because once it's out of my head, swirling up
Yep.
here and onto paper, and I go, oh, well, that's kind of, well, look at that. It's right in front of you. You don't, it diffuses its power, I think is really what the trick is. So how else can we look at our body as a magic wand, like bring a little bit more magic into our lives?
Yeah. So, okay, now that you've connected and you've felt emotion, now it's about, this is the exciting part. I get really excited. Now it's about feeling the subtle energies that are giving us that guidance toward the joy, toward the ease.
Yeah.
So, whatever is meant to be happening, if we can line up with what, like, I always think of it this way. Here's my soul. It's kind of up here. It's got all this information that I don't have in my earthly logical brain, and it's got the map, and it's like, oh my gosh, if she would just turn left and then right and then go in a circle, it'll be perfect. Whereas I would never think of that in my head. So I'm just having to kind of fly blind and trust that my soul has the map and it's going to give me these little GPS directions. And the only way I can hear them is to feel that subtle sensation in my body. Like, woo, okay, this is giving me this expansive feeling. It's giving me a little uplifting feeling. It's giving me a little sparkly feeling, whatever it is that's like light, joy, presence. And then I know, okay, move in that direction, continually move in that direction. So it's like this instrument we have here is this magic wand. If you just know how to use it, it's guiding you to make the magic. It's giving you everything you need. And the fear might be like, I think we always interpret fear like, oh, I should stop. But no, it might be pieces of that guidance as well. So if we're tuning in and listening, then we get the map laid out in front of us. And
right.
I think that's when it's easy and fun and playful.
And I think fear also will tell us what we need and might point us towards healers or coaches or therapists or, just people that you might need in your life to help you along the way in the journey as well, right?
Absolutely. Because community, I think divine feminine is also about community, connection, being with others who are going to either help us or play with us, both.
Yeah. Yeah, it's critically important. Yes, I love this. And I think that what it boils down to in my mind is slowing down as well. Slowing down so you can actually be attuned to those subtle little cues. Because I think we are as a society, just go, 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 fast, 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 faster, faster, faster.
Yes.
So how do we stop that? How do we stop striving for achievement and realize that enough is enough?
I have a crazy way to simplify that, actually. Because I love going. I love doing, like many of us do. And I think we can develop ways to actually be in the flow of doing and playing and having fun and still be tuned in. And that's kind of, to me, it's like ninja level, right? Let's be mind body ninjas. Where we can be in action, in business, playing, because I love everything I do. I love being in motion, but still have that happening. So I think the way that I've found that works really well for myself and my clients is to do something kind of surprising. And that is, you take a little time each day, you're connecting into the body, you're feeling these uncomfortable things, but you do one other little interesting step. And that is, you actually bring with you into that discomfort or into that self-awareness some kind of amazing, beautiful memory. Could be a time in your life that was awesome, could be just a person you love, could even be a tree. Like, keep it simple. So you bring in this sense of peace and joy and love right away, right into the mix. So it's like you're pulling that divine in on purpose as you're in the mess of the emotions and the hard part, so that it's easier to let yourself sit down and slow down. Because I think it's hard to slow down when slowing down means I'm going to have to feel this stuff that's inside of me. So let's make it more fun. Let's make it more doable. Let's make it possible, because it doesn't feel possible to me all the time to sit in the hard stuff, unless I also can say, okay, I'm going to sit in the hard stuff for a minute, and now I'm going to remember this memory. I'm going to let that happen. Then I'm going to go back to the hard stuff for a minute, then I'm going to go back to this beautiful memory. So we're giving ourselves some kind of like big, giant comforting blanket in which to feel the difficult stuff. And then it's easier for me to sit down and do it for a couple minutes a day, or 30 minutes, or whatever it is that I need. And then it creates my ability to be in the flow during the day, to listen, to tune in, and quickly start getting those cool messages. So that's what I like.
I really like that. And I think that gives a bit of an anchor for you as well, in that moment. I mean, when you gave that idea, I think the first thing that popped into my mind is either my dear friend Wendy just sitting next to me, or my very beloved dog Otis. Like, those are things that give you instant comfort. So I love that. Yep. So Abigail, thank you so much for all of your wisdom. It's so great. And I think this is one of those episodes where people are going to want to listen and then listen again and grab another nugget and all that. But I have a few questions I like to ask all guests that are on the podcast. First and foremost, what are you reading these days? Is there maybe one book or blog that you're reading that's either inspiring you or maybe poking at you and challenging you a bit?
Yeah, I'm definitely being inspired right now by the work of Martha Peterson. So her book is called Move Without Pain. And she has a really unique way of connecting to the body that is very surprising and different. And it releases pain, which is always awesome, and makes us able to move more fluidly in our bodies. And so it's kind of like this golden secret that nobody knows about. So I wanted to share that because it's amazing work.
Excellent. Well, we'll put a link down in the show notes for everybody so they can check that out as well.
Cool.
I'm a big believer that gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell us, what's one thing you're grateful for right now in your life?
Oh, that's so easy. My daughter. She's just like this. She's 5. So she's this shining golden example of play and connection and joy. So definitely her.
Excellent. So you talk about mind-body magic, and I know you're releasing a training video hopefully soon, and new products and all that in alignment with that. Is there maybe a freebie that you could give us to connect with you and learn more about this?
Yeah, so I'm really in the creative process right now. So I don't have anything tangibly that's the magic piece just yet. So totally in the process there, trusting the flow. But the kind process is already available. So that's something people could grab right away.
Excellent.
And then we'll see what gets created in the next month or two.
That's great. And again, the link's down in the show notes for you guys to get the ebook for the KIND process. And where do you hang out online? What social media are you on the most, if any?
Yeah, generally Facebook for me is being a mother. I find I have to focus on one
yes.
thing. So just Facebook for now. I'm sure I will branch out eventually.
Oh, we are all about simplifying our social media over here as well. So that's facebook.com/Abigail Steidley Coach. And again, the link's in the show notes, so you just click down below for it. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I mean, I think the work that you're doing is such an important message out in the world. Both men and women suffer from
Definitely.
this. And
Yes.
I just appreciate you so much for sharing this with people and with the world. So who is one person in your network that you think we should interview on the Simplifiers podcast, and why?
Oh, so I'm going to tell you, Carmen Schreffler is her name. She is all about making your entrepreneurial business work, and she's super practical, but she brings in the magic, and I love her work. It's so amazing. So I don't always have all the practical knowledge for doing marketing or social media or any of that, and she can take it all and just make it possible, simple, and easy. So that's what I love about her.
Love it. Carmen sounds perfect. So great.
She's awesome.
We will definitely connect with her and get her on the podcast soon.
Awesome.
So my very last question for you, and again, Abigail, thank you so much for your time today, is this. Somebody is listening to this episode right now and is getting super inspired. And maybe, just maybe, she is feeling a bit of chronic pain somewhere in her body. And she's going, what is this? I am too young for my body to be breaking down. She's inspired by what you're talking about, this idea of making my body a magic wand, but maybe just needs a little bit of an encouraging message. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now to encourage her?
I would say you can absolutely heal. The body is magical, the soul is magical, and there's simple ways to connect and create that health that you really, really want. It's absolutely possible.
Abigail, thank you so much for being on the Simplifiers podcast today.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.